Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Very warm good morning to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. I welcome you all to today's session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. Also, before we begin, reminding you very quickly, our prelims test series for 2024 has already begun from the 24th of December. The first 3 tests were free for everyone. Just in case you have still not registered for that, all that you have to do is click on the link given in the description of the video to register for this test series, where you will get 30 tests with all the detailed explanation and also video analysis of all these tests one by one. Now let's see what are the topics that we have taken up for today's discussion. Now, from the prelims examination point of view, we have taken up a couple of news stories. One, about the new development in the field of superconductivity and certain changes by the DGCA. For the mains examination point of view, we have about 4 articles. First, an article about how UGC, that is the University Grants Commission, is trying to inculcate value-based education. Second article is about European Union's carbon border tax. How does it impact India specifically? Third, an article about GI tags, because very recently a lot of GI tags were given to different products across the entire country. And then there's an article about how surgical care, that is access to surgery, minor or major, is still not very universal in India. Still, only a very few people have access to high quality surgery, even though we have a lot of hospitals across the entire country. Cities are filled up with hospitals, but you will still see the quality of care, especially surgical care, is not up to the mark. All these are the topics that we have taken up for today's discussion. One more thing, and I told this earlier as well. Newspapers have a tendency to publish multiple articles on one single topic, and you might not see a lot of good addition to all those articles. For example, in today's Hindu newspaper also, there is an article about that hit and run law, why the truck drivers actually had that strike. The reason why we have skipped that article for today is there is nothing new in that article that we have not already discussed. So just because a Hindu newspaper publishes 15 to 20 articles on a specific topic does not mean that you have to read each and every one of those. It's just a duplication of effort. If we are confident enough that we have understood the entire law, we have understood the entire issue, we don't need to go through each and every article on that topic. And that's why we have specifically skipped those articles, because we have discussed each and everything that is needed to be discussed, and there's no new development as such in that law. So on that note, let's start with the first one. Now, the first article is not based on something that happened very recently. It's not based on something that is current. It's based on a very generic issue, something that happened a few months back by the UGC. So UGC, the University Grants Commission, is a statutory body that regulates higher education in India, that gives norms for the universities, for their operations. It tells the universities about how do they have to impart education. Now, what they do is, after every few years, they keep on making certain changes in the recommendations in how the universities must perform their functions. So what happened was, a few months back, the University Grants Commission issued certain regulations, issued certain guidelines on the topic called Mulya Pravah. Now, what is Mulya Pravah? Let's try and understand that. Mulya Pravah, if you literally translate that into English, that would be called as moral education or value education. So basically, a few years back, that is in 2019, originally, the UGC had published guidelines called as Mulya Pravah. The entire idea of those guidelines was that the education given out in the universities across the country does not only has to be specific to the subject, it also has to be based on certain values. For example, the UGC had noticed that in the workplace across the country, there have been a lot of evils that have been seen in large numbers. Evils such as discrimination on the basis of gender, evils such as harassment at the workplace, evils such as having a pay gap because of the gender, and many other evils of those kind. The UGC thought that a way to control all of these, to curb all of these evils, is to start addressing this problem at the education level. So the UGC came up with these guidelines called as Mulya Pravah, that is, universities must also focus on value education. Now, if you remember, when we were in schools, we used to have a subject called moral science. Remember? Now, if you were in good schools, then you had a proper moral science subject where the teacher used to come, give a lot of examples from real life, try and make the students understand. But in most other schools, including where I studied, in most other schools, this period was not taken very seriously. It either became a reading exercise because the student was just asked to read out a certain chapter, everyone did the reading practice, or some other teacher used to come and take this period, science or maths teacher, that our syllabus is lagging behind, let us take that subject. So this, unfortunately, has been a part of our syllabus, our curriculum for a long time, but has never been taken seriously as some of the other subjects are taken, even at the school level. Always science, maths, these kind of subjects have always been given a topmost priority. UGC is trying to correct that. That is what they tried to correct in 2019 when they gave these guidelines, and now they have revised these guidelines once again. The basic idea is that even at the university stage, the education that is imparted to the students, it has to be value based. There has to be transparency by the universities in their working. They have to make sure that the students are aware of not just their skills or their knowledge. They also have to be aware of the certain social problems that exist in the society, so that when they become a part of the workforce, they don't propagate the same problem, so that they don't continue being a part of the problem. As I said earlier, the UGC is trying to address issues such as favoritism in hiring, training, promotion, sexual harassment at workplace, gender discrimination. All of these are something that the UGC is targeting. UGC wants to bring that change. Now, as I said earlier, just having a new subject or including a certain chapter will not bring change on the ground. We have all seen the example of moral science. We have all studied moral science in school. Doesn't mean that everyone is moral. If you look at the activities of people, the people who commit crimes are those people who would have studied these things in the school. Even the people who commit the most heinous crimes, they would also have been told by their teachers, by their parent, that this is wrong and this is right. But they still committed those acts. So just by having these as a part of your syllabus doesn't really mean that you will automatically get rid of these evils. And thus the UGC also has to make sure not just focus on teaching the subject, but also focus on transparency in the working of the universities also. They have to ensure that the way they conduct, for example, the examinations are conducted, the way that the results are published, the way that the university recruits teachers, the way that the university treats their students, all of that has to keep these values in mind, values of respect, values of harmony, values of accountability, etc. Only when the universities show this to the students, only when the universities follow this, they will have to set an example for the next generation. The universities in the country have been or can be criticized for being extremely confidential, for not being transparent enough with their own students, for not publishing detailed results, for delaying the results time and time again. That also has to be taken into consideration. The universities across the country has to make sure that only those information that is important, confidential, remains confidential. The other ones, the agenda of the meetings, whatever has been discussed should be made public so that the people know how the universities are running. Now, this Mulya Pravah 2.0, this is the entire document. So I'm not going to show the entire document. This is what this document talks about. It says that Mulya Pravah, that is value and education, includes a lot of these things: integrity, belongingness, harmony, respectfulness, sustainability, etc. This is what the University Grants Commission wants the universities to follow. As you can see, as I said, this is not a recent news. This guideline 2.0 version was actually released in May 2023. In May 2023, as you see, the letter given to different universities, to different chancellors, vice chancellors, to implement Mulya Pravah 2.0 guidelines, to have value-based environment in the classrooms in higher education, to enforce that higher education is not separated from moral education, from value-based education. That is the idea that UGC is trying to propagate. UGC, the body in question, as I said, it's a statutory body, it's an old body. It was formed in 1953. The idea was simple: to maintain the standards of education, specifically higher education in India, to maintain the standards of teaching, examination, research in university education. One of the other responsibilities of UGC is to keep a track of whether the universities are formed as per the law or not. You will see every few months the UGC releases a list of fake universities, universities that don't have proper accreditation, to remove all of them, to warn the student that these are the universities that you should not take admission in. This is the role of the UGC in the country. The second topic that we have is about the new regulation of the EU that we discussed earlier as well, in short known as the carbon tax. For those who don't know, let me first try and explain this. What exactly is this? What is the EU trying to do? So, EU says, EU, that is the European Union, they say that if we import something from China, let's take a very simple example, okay? EU says that if we manufacture a mobile phone in Europe only, if you manufacture a mobile phone in Europe, it might cost us, let's say, 100 euros. But the same mobile phone, when it is manufactured in China, it only costs China 50 euros. That is how China is able to import all these phones to EU, and China's economy gets a boost because of EU. One of the reasons why China has been able to make these products at a lower cost is because they don't have a concern about the environment. EU says that their manufacturing capacity, their manufacturing processes are very clean. They make sure there is no carbon emission, because of which their manufacturing cost is very high. Countries such as China and even India, they don't pay a lot of attention to their environment. They are happy to pollute their environment, and that is why their products are cheaper. So EU says we will correct that. How? EU says that now when China imports this mobile phone to EU, we will impose a tax on it called the carbon tax. How much will the tax be? If a mobile phone was made in EU for 100 euros, China is making it for 50 euros, we will impose 50 euro tax so that the cost becomes the same as it was made in Europe. That is the entire idea of carbon tax. So what is EU trying to do is they are trying to achieve two things. Number one, they are trying to force the other countries such as India, China, other countries to have a cleaner manufacturing process. They are trying to force the other countries to reduce their carbon footprint if they want to send something or sell something to EU. Number one. The second intention, which EU is not speaking openly, but the second intention is they are trying to help their own industry, because their own industry was not able to compete with China, India, etc. because of their affordability. Because the Chinese and Indian products, China much more than India, was flooding the European market, and the European companies were not able to sell their own products. Now, in order to make sure that the European products also are sold in the market so that they are at an equal or competing price, this is the second objective of it. So first objective, which they are openly saying that we want to control carbon emissions, so we are doing it for everyone's good, their own version of white man's burden. And the second objective, which they are not speaking about openly, is to make their own products more competitive. Now, the problem here is faced by nations which are importing stuff, or rather exporting stuff to the EU. Like China sells a lot of stuff to EU. India sells a lot of stuff to EU. In fact, India has a trade advantage with EU. We have a positive trade balance with EU. So for India, for China, it's a cause of concern, because our exporters who sell stuff to EU are worried now that their products will be imposed taxes and their products will become costlier, and thus the market will reduce. Now, it has already come into force from 1st of October 2023, but this is right now in more of an experimental phase. Right now, they are not very strict, but it is expected that from 2026, when it starts officially, there will be proper financial burden put, there will be fines put. Right now, it's still in gradual phase. Right now, they are still trying to see what kind of taxes to put. They are still trying to see if they can choose certain companies which are allowed to import products, etc. It will start officially roll out 100% from 2026. It has partially rolled out gradually from October 1, 2023. Now, the EU, as you know, has been at the forefront of fight against climate change. They have been demanding that countries such as India, China also should prepone their target of achieving net zero. As you know, India's target of net zero is 2070. We say that by 2070 we'll achieve net zero. China says by 2060 they'll achieve net zero. But EU wants us to prepone that target. And they are doing this so that we are forced to have a cleaner manufacturing. EU itself has said that they are trying to achieve 55% reduction in greenhouse gas emission by 2030 as compared to 1990 level. And they are doing this, that is, they are bringing this law to achieve this target. Now, one other interesting part of this law is the emission trading system. Now, what exactly is this? Let's try and understand how does it work. So, EU says they will give a certain quota to the companies. Let's take an example. Let's say EU says to, let's say Samsung. EU will say to Samsung that, okay, we will allow you that you can have a total emission of 10,000 tons of CO2. You can emit 10,000 tons of CO2 to produce your mobile phone. If you emit more than that, then we will have to put an extra charge on you. Similarly, they will give quota to other companies as well. So similarly, let's say to Samsung, they are given this quota. Let's assume to Panasonic, they gave another quota of 10,000 tons of CO2. Now what happens here is, let's assume Samsung has utilized 10,000 tons of CO2. They have emitted more than 10,000 tons. Now what do? One option that they have is they can buy the quota from Panasonic. Panasonic can restrict their emission to 8,000 only. The remaining 2,000 tons they will transfer to Samsung in exchange for money. This is called emission trading system, in which whatever limit that they have been given by EU, if they want to go beyond that, they have to buy it from someone else from the market price. And they can buy these allowances corresponding to the greenhouse gas emissions. This is where the system is incentivizing those companies that are reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. So if you want to earn money as a company, you don't just have to earn money by selling the product. You can even earn money by cutting down your emissions so that the remaining quota that you have can be sold to the other companies. India has also been working on a similar model. We have also been working on something like this. Now, this is not new. If you have been reading about something called the Kyoto Protocol in the UNFCCC, it's very similar to that. The carbon credits in the Kyoto Protocol were very similar to this only. Companies were given a certain quota that this is how much emission you can have. If you go beyond that, then you will have to buy it from someone else. And buy it at what price? It's not a fixed price. It's like a stock. In the market, you negotiate with them. Whatever price the buyer and the seller agree on, you buy that quota, and only then you will be able to emit that much pollution going forward in your manufacturing process. Now, let's talk about India specifically. India is looking at a very difficult time ahead with respect to our exports to the EU. EUC as a market is very attractive for India. EU is a place where people have a high per capita income. That is why the exporters like that, because you can sell expensive products to EU as well, unlike some of the other developing countries. That's why when these kind of laws change in EU, it is a major impact on a country such as India. Now, India is one of the top 8 countries that will be affected because we export a lot of stuff to the EU. If you look at international reports, in 2022, 27% of India's exports of iron, steel, aluminium went to the EU. Now, these are the products which are basically connected to a lot of emissions. These are the industries that have a lot of pollution, that emit a lot of carbon dioxide. So these products specifically will be impacted. Now, India is still in talks. We are still negotiating at the highest level to see if we can have certain exemptions. What options does India have? As per the article, the first will be maybe we can challenge this at the international stage. Maybe we can challenge this at the UNFCCC, at the WTO, by saying that this goes against the concept of common but differentiated responsibility. Remember, common but differentiated responsibility means although every country has a responsibility to cut down emissions, but the responsibility is higher with the developed world and lower with the developing world. So we can say it's putting more burden on us. Second option, we can convince EU that whatever tax they collect from India, they should return that money to India with a condition that Indian government will invest that money in green energy. Now, this is something that should be ideal. If you, I'm sure all of you would have heard about PL 480. Remember the PL 480 program after our independence, when India was short of food grains, USA used to supply food grains to us under PL 480 program. It was very similar to this. Under PL 480 program, the Americans supplied us food grains, not free, at a very, very low cost. So whatever money we gave to the US, for example, we gave 100 crore rupees for those food grains. They used to invest the money back to India only by building some infrastructure, etc. for that money. Similar kind of arrangement can be done here. Ask EU, convince EU that whatever tax you collect from the Indian products coming in, don't use that money for your own prosperity. Give that money back to India with a condition, with this confidence that India, the government, will invest that money to further our green technology. Third option, India can go ahead with the aggressive route, maybe challenge this in the World Trade Organization, WTO. Now, ideally, if you have to resolve this for India, the best way forward would be the second option, to negotiate that the money comes back to us, we invest ourselves. But if that does not turn into reality, if that is not a feasible option, then obviously going forward, we will have to take the route of appealing it at the international level. EU is not the only one that is doing something like this. UK has also done this. UK has declared that they will have their own similar law by 2027. Now, this again is a problem, because UK also is a significant trading partner of India. We sell a lot of products also. We have been in talks for a free trade agreement with the UK as well. So this can have an issue for us going forward. So in the long run, as we see more and more developed world going towards this route of carbon tax, it would be wise, it would be suitable for us also to put a lot of effort into cutting down our emissions in the manufacturing sector. Because today it's EU, tomorrow it's UK, day after that it can be the US as well, then it can be other countries as well. So rather than waiting for the other countries to go to the same path and harm India's exports, we have to make sure that going forward, we are already prepared with reduced emissions going forward. This is a simple example, as I explained in the first slide, of how this tax works. If a product, while being made in EU, will cost 75 euros, and the same product being manufactured abroad cost only 10 euros, when that product is sold to Europe, they will not buy it at 10 euro itself. They will impose a $65 tax, carbon tax, to bring it at par to 75 euros itself. What will it do? It will punish those countries. Why? Because they have been emitting a lot of carbon dioxide, and it will also bring European manufacturers at par with the other developing countries. These are some of the sectors which will be impacted by this law: steel, aluminium, electricity, fertilizer, cement, all of these high emitting or heavy emitting industries, as you can see. Now also, as you can see here, the impact will be major on India, but from China's point of view also, they're also thinking about negotiating this. They're also thinking about how to go ahead and basically find a way out not to be able or not to have such a big impact on their manufacturing sector going forward. Also, some of the other concerns that India has, apart from the fact that our exports will be harmed, India also would have to have a very strict compliance now. Because see, one thing with EU is, if you want to sign any agreement with EU, be it the free trade agreement or any trade agreement, you have to comply with a lot of their regulations. So complying with all of them would take a lot of effort. It also goes against our idea of having a free trade agreement, because India has been in talks with the EU. We have been hoping for a free trade agreement. But even if the free trade agreement becomes a reality, this zero duty principle of free trade agreement will not apply here. Also, it contradicts EU and developed nations' commitment to green transition. See, for the longest time, rich countries in the EU have been promising that they will handhold, they will help the developing countries with technology, with money, help them transition to a cleaner future. But this law does not seem to be in line with that. This law is more about punishing the developing countries rather than helping them take that path. So this is why India is not happy about what EU has done with respect to their carbon tax. The next article that we have here is about the GI tags that you would have read about, and you would have seen many questions on this earlier as well. Just a few days back, 17 products from 6 different UTs and states were given the GI tags. That is why it again has come in the news. GI tags as a question also has been asked by the UPSC in the prelims examination multiple times. There have been questions in match the column form as well, where they give you 3 or 4 products on one side and states on the other side. You have to match with which state is it matching. They can also give you certain products name and ask you which of these has been given a GI tag or has not been given a GI tag. That's why it's important. Now, it's not possible to remember all of them. There are hundreds of products that have been given GI tag. So my advice is, whichever products are given the GI tag recently, and if you, God willing, if you reach the interview stage, then you should know the products from your state at least that have been given the GI tag. From the prelims exam or mains exam, your state specific does not really matter. For prelims and mains exam, whichever products were given this tag recently, remember that. If you reach the interview stage, then focus on your state specific as well. So recently, 17 products were given this GI tag specifically, and those included the Dongaria Kond shawl from Odisha, agriculture products from Sundarban honey in West Bengal, etc. All of these have been given the GI tag. Now, I'm sure all of you know the GI tag specifically indicates the fact that this product belongs to this geography or belongs to this area originally, and it's a tag that certifies that a certain minimum quality has been maintained. So as a buyer, when you're buying a GI tag product, you are confident enough that I'm buying the original stuff, that I'm buying the stuff that is originally from this place. So it increases the market value of the product. It allows the seller to sell it at a higher price, make more margins, and it allows the product to have a broader market both nationally and internationally. That is why the GI tag becomes extremely, extremely important. Now understand this. Let's say GI tag has been given to a specific product from a specific place. Let's take the simple example. So Dongaria Kond shawl from Odisha has been given the GI tag. Now that does not mean that every raw material that is used in that shawl has to come from Odisha only. Please have that clear in your mind. It's not about the raw material that is used in that product. For example, the threads, etc. made in that product, the machine that is used to make those shawls, they might not come from Odisha, they might come from somewhere else. So the GI tag is given to the finished product. It's not given to the raw material that is used to make that product. So raw material basically can come from other places as well. For example, if the Banarasi pan has been given the GI tag, it does not mean that the leaf has to come from or has to grow from Varanasi only. It can come from other places as well. And the same applies to other GI tags as well. Right now, as I said earlier, there are about 500 GI tags, over 500 right now. And that's why it's not possible to remember all of them. But you can remember a few things. For example, they are given under 5 major categories, and I'll tell you about those categories as well. Second fact, every state in India has at least one GI tag. So no state can say we don't have one. If you look at the states with the highest number of GI tags, Tamil Nadu leads the list with 61. Second comes Uttar Pradesh. Then comes Karnataka. Then comes Kerala. And at 5th, we have Maharashtra. These are the 5 categories. As we were speaking, there are 5 categories under which the GI tags are given. Agriculture, foodstuff, handicrafts, manufactured and natural. As you can see here, the most of the GI tags have been awarded under the handicrafts category, followed by agriculture. The state-wise data, as you can see here, again, not possible to remember all the 5 categories you can remember. State-wise, you can remember the top 4, top 5. That would be good enough for you. Amongst the states also, this is how they have been divided. It will be too much detail for you to remember, but just have a reading of it. Tamil Nadu, most of this for handicrafts. Uttar Pradesh again, handicrafts. Karnataka, most of it for agriculture. Kerala, most agriculture. Maharashtra again, most of them for agriculture. This is how The GI tags have been divided. Now again, the GI tags, once it is given to a product, it's not a lifetime thing. It is valid for about 10 years. And it also, as I said, helps the product being sold at a much more attractive price in the market. It also prevents the product from being copied or imitated by the others. It is legally protected. It's under the Geographical Indication, that is GI, of Goods Registration and Protection Act of 1999. Also, the WTO also recognizes this. It's a part of WTO agreement on trade-related aspects of intellectual property right. That is the TRIPS agreement, as you call it. So it's an important component for the government to give boost to certain trades or certain product, to give a boost to the MSME sector as well, so that they can market their products with this tag and demand a higher price and higher quality in the market. The next article that we have here is specifically about the healthcare sector in India, and more specifically within the healthcare sector, the surgical care. Most of the articles about healthcare sector in India and the problems focus on primary healthcare, focus on tertiary healthcare, etc. But there has not been a lot of attention specifically given to the surgical care, that is the surgeries that we have. Now, it is a well-known fact that the surgeries in India, especially if you do not have an insurance, are not affordable for everyone. And even if you can afford, it is not a guarantee that you will get the best quality surgical care. If you look at the numbers published by Lancet Commission on Global Surgery, it says that in 2019-2020, India recorded about 14 million minor surgeries. Now, when you say 14 million minor surgeries, that is a huge number. But if you look at the population scale that we have in India, the population scale does not really say that this number is very high. For example, let's compare this with smaller countries. In New Zealand, there were 5,000 surgeries per 1 lakh people. So every 1 lakh people had 5,000 surgeries. In India, the rate is between 166 and 3,646 surgeries per 1 lakh people. Now that indicates the fact that much lesser people are getting their access to surgery. And I'll give you a very simple example. Go to any rural area or go to urban areas where the people are not earning a lot of money, and you will see one very unique thing. Amongst the older population, a majority of them would have an issue of cataract. They won't be able to see clearly from their eye. They have a cataract issue. Now, cataract surgeries, fortunately enough, over time have become extremely efficient. If you talk to doctors, cataract surgeries now happen within a few minutes. Leave aside staying in the hospital, that's not even a question. Cataract surgeries, most of the eye specialists say it won't even take half an hour. Within a few minutes, the cataract surgery will be done. And the cost has also reduced considerably. Obviously, private sector will charge you very high fee, but it is not a very unaffordable surgery if you look at it. But even then, you will see a lot of poor people in the older age bracket not being able to get the cataract surgery done. Because maybe it's not affordable, maybe they don't have the knowledge about it, maybe they don't have the accessibility to a nearby hospital or a doctor. This is an example of how in India, because of the diversity, because of the comparison, because of the difference in the pay scale, some people would always have much more access to doctors and the healthcare as compared to others. I've said this earlier as well. Whenever you talk about problems in the education sector, problems in the healthcare sector in India, please understand, none of these problems exist if you have the money. All these problems that we talk about, the problem of not great healthcare, problem of not great education, all of that exists for people who can't afford it. If you can afford it, there is no dearth of great hospitals, great doctors or great schools. If you can afford to pay a fee of thousands of rupees to a school per month, your kid will get the best of education. It's about whether the country is giving great education to someone who cannot afford it as well. Because if you are giving great education to some people and not so great to the others, the difference between them starts from the childhood itself. So you can't compare these two people to have the same outcome in life going forward. If your starting point in life is very different, if I am learning in class 10th what someone else learned in class 2nd because of their schooling, then obviously our starting points are not the same. Similarly, healthcare, also it's a lot dependent on whether you can afford. Because if you have the money, you don't even have to get your healthcare done in India. You can just fly abroad, go to the best hospitals. You compare a country of their standard of education, healthcare, when you see how much are they able to provide to the people who can't afford it. Now, right now, as per the report in the Lancet, countries that have low middle income, they have shown, or they have to keep a record of these 6 indicators. Basically, they should collect data about the population within 2 hours of surgical care facility, means how much population is able to reach a hospital within 2 hours or not. The report also talked about how many surgeons, anesthesists, etc. exist for every 1 lakh people, population that is at the risk of impoverishment, population that is at the risk of catastrophic expenditure due to surgery, because in a lot of different places in India, if you don't have a medical insurance, having a surgery or medical care would be out of the budget for most of the people. In India, for many people, having surgery is out of question, not just in India but in many places across the world, and there are many reasons for that. Specifically, if you look at India, what are the reasons why we don't have access to surgical care? First reason, people are not able to reach the hospital on time. Especially if you look at people in the poor areas, in the rural areas where there is no proper infrastructure, no proper road network, it's difficult for you to reach hospital on time if you have an emergency. Even if you reach on time, there is no guarantee that you will have the necessary resources for the treatment. A lot of hospitals don't have the adequate machine. A lot of hospitals, you saw in COVID-19, most hospitals did not have any ventilators, did not have any life support. So what happens in that case? Even then, not just the machines, then it's dependent on whether you get the correct doctors or not. Not just one single doctor cannot perform a surgery. That just happens in the movies. There is usually multiple doctors, support staff that is required. Do they have this or not? Are they able to pay for those surgeries or not? Then the surgical care that is required, training that the surgeons have been getting. Also, the care that you require after your surgery, because after your surgery, when you are recovering, that is also critical time period. Then there is also absence of universal healthcare, means absence of insurance. The reason why most of the people go to surgeries in India in middle class is because they have medical insurance. If you don't have that insurance with you, a very small amount of people would be able to afford the surgery going forward, and that is when it becomes a problem. Going forward, the idea that the author suggests here is ensure that there is a big system of affordable surgeries at the public healthcare centers and at the private centers as well. Make sure there is adequate surgical access. Make sure the preventable diseases are not going ahead and expanding at a very fast pace if they can be prevented through surgery. I gave you an example of cataract. It's just a very small example. There are many such other problems that can be corrected with a very minor surgery, but only reason why it has still not been corrected is because of lack of surgical care and the lack of affordability. These are some of the other problems that we have in our healthcare system. Generic problems: lack of infrastructure, lack of hospital beds. We have only 0.9 beds per 1,000 population, even though about 2/3 of India lives in rural part, but even then only 30% of the hospital beds in India are in the rural areas. We have still not been able to control non-communicable diseases. The number of doctors in India as we require is much lesser than the WHO standard. WHO recommends 1:1,000 ratio, while in India that ratio is much larger. We need 20 lakh doctors by 2030 at least, and we are way off the mark right now. Now, from the prelims exam point of view, a couple of news stories. First, on the concept of superconductivity. Let's understand the very simple idea of superconductivity. Conductivity means when electric current is able to pass through a material. You all know that whenever any electric current passes through a material, there will be some resistance, at least some resistance. Means the material tries to stop that current from flowing. That means there is a loss of current, the amount of current that you are actually wanting to flow from input to output. There is a difference. There is a bit of loss in terms of heat, etc. On the other hand, superconductors are those materials that do not have any resistance, that allow 100% flow of the current. It has a lot of different applications. The problem with superconductivity, however, is that at present, the materials that are known to be superconductors are only superconductors when they are taken to extreme temperature and extreme pressure. Only when you take a specific material to extremely low temperature, only and only then it becomes superconductor. We don't know of any material right now that is superconductor at the room temperature. That is what the scientists are running for. The scientists around the world are working to find out if any material can act as a superconductor in the room temperature. This is something that the scientific community around the world is grappling with. Now, this is where you also have to understand something called the Meissner effect. Meissner effect is what I just explained to you. Meissner effect means that the materials may be able to conduct electric currents without any resistance. That is when they become superconductors, but they do not exhibit this property at room temperature. They exhibit this either when they are cooled to extremely low temperature or when they are subjected to extremely high pressure. The scientific community is trying to understand and find out if there are some material that can show superconductivity at RTP. RTP is a short form for room temperature and pressure. This will save billions and billions of dollars for the scientific community. This material can be used for medical diagnostic, computing, power generation, etc. Now, why is it in the news? Because some scientists in South Korea claim that they may have certain success in that. They have reported signs of near room temperature and pressure superconductivity in a material called LK99. It is copper substituted lead epitete. Now, the other members of the scientific community, other parts of the world have raised question marks over this. When this claim was first made a few months back, scientific community was not ready to believe it, but the scientists in South Korea have again given this data out in the public, saying that, see, we have enough proof now to show that we do have certain material called LK99, which is able to show superconductivity at the room temperature and pressure itself. Whether it is accepted by the other scientists around the world, we'll only have to see in the months to come. These are some of the applications of superconductivity, as you can see here. The last news that we have is from the front page. Remember, yesterday also we discussed an editorial about aviation safety. We discussed what DGCA does, the role of DGCA. Today again there's a news of the DGCA. It seems to be that the DGCA, under pressure from the pilot community about a lot of workload on the pilots leading to stress and dangerous landings, they have made certain changes in the rules about the working condition of the pilots. For example, they have said that pilots which have to fly between midnight, that is 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. This is a time period which is termed as the most difficult time period for the pilots to fly. If they are flying the plane between this, then it will be categorized as night duty. Pilots cannot have more than 2 consecutive night duties. They cannot carry out more than 2 landings. Earlier, consecutively, they were allowed to carry 6 night landings, but now maximum 2 night landings are allowed between midnight and 6 a.m. Earlier, it used to be midnight till 5, now it is midnight till 6, and earlier 6 landings are allowed, now only 2 landings can be carried out. Also, no pilot can be rostered. Rostered means scheduled to fly consecutively for 2 night duties. More than 2. Maximum 2 night duties are allowed. More than 2, you cannot have that. The pilots did not like this. One of the demands made by the pilots was that they did not want consecutive night duties. They said that it puts a lot of pressure on their body, it increases the stress level. They only wanted 1 night duty at a time. But DGCA has said maximum 2 night duties has been allowed even now. Also, the new norm says pilots will have a weekly rest time of continuous 48 hours at least. Earlier, it was continuous rest of 36 hours and then basically rest period in between. But now continuous at least 48 hours of rest time has to be provided. This is in line with the demands from the pilots that the increasing stress level is leading to more and more occasions of dangerous landing and lives of the passengers also coming in danger. This brings us to the end of today's discussion. Here are a couple of practice questions that you can write answers to, submit on the student answer writing portal, the link for which in the description of the video. This is a portal where you can check each other's answers as well, give each other feedback and learn from each other's mistake. Also remember, as soon as the session ends, you have to go over to our Telegram channel to attend the quiz based on these topics to revise whatever we have just discussed. Thank you so much for watching in. Do join us tomorrow as well at 10 a.m. for the next session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. Have a good day ahead. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.